Okay, so camera shake. I made a tutorial about this where I said, all right, you grab your camera, you hit I, add a keyframe here, you grab one of these axes, and in the modifiers panel here, you add some noise to it, and maybe scale it up, and maybe scale it down, and look at that, it's camera shake. And if you want, you can copy this and apply it to another axis, boop, like that, and maybe we offset it, and there we go. We've got our camera shake. Except that this is not good. And when I say camera shake, I don't always mean whoa. I mean any imperfection in the animation of a camera, and it can be really, really subtle. But camera shake isn't just noise. It's a byproduct of the method you're using to move the camera. If you're walking around holding the camera, looking at stuff, the camera's literally going to be bouncing, kind of like this. If you're standing filming a wedding, you know, and your legs get kind of tired or whatever, your hips are going to be a fulcrum, and you're mostly going to be like that. Same with like your hands. If you take a camera and you rotate it, you're not just rotating it, you're also moving it, you know, a foot and a half. Even if you just try to rotate it like this, the front of the lens is still moving like 3 inches. And all of this comes through in the camera shake. If you ever try to stay as still as possible and move your head just the tiniest little bit, and your eyes still have absolutely no problem seeing that movement. And that's because we use it as one of our tools for not falling over. And it turns out humans are really, really good at not falling over. It's kind of one of our superpowers. So check this out. I'm gonna go up to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and I'm going to install. Go to the zip file and click Install Add-on, and there we go, activate that. And now, if we go into the camera properties here, we have this new panel called Camera Wobble. Okay, let's just pick one. Walk to the store. And we have a full rotational, locational translation applied on top of the camera, so we can still move it and animate it however we like. So here, I'm gonna add one keyframe here, location rotation. I'm gonna add another one here, location rotation. Shift E, make them linear, and now we have just an animation of walking to the store. And if you want, you can like be like, hey, let's look up here. Let's just slap some rotation keyframes on top. Whoa. And it's so easy. And then here, let's maybe just look back down over this way. And if you think maybe this is like a little bit much, you can just turn down the influence. And look, it becomes all perfectly smooth and digital again. I am gonna use this all of the time. Or we could do Handycam Run 3D. This one doesn't make much sense if the camera isn't moving fast. Here, let's shrink all these keyframes a little bit, and then, whoa, look at that! Works pretty good! This one in particular is helped a lot by motion blur because it's just so shaky. Or here, let's add a keyframe here. And let's go a little bit later and add another keyframe here. We're gonna be checking out this pigeon. Right now, this is a very robotic camera move, but let's pick Investigation 3D. Suddenly it looks like it's kind of a vacation photography. Somebody's just trying to get a little bit closer to this pigeon buddy. Oh, pigeon buddy doesn't mind. And if you go, this is a bit much, you can, again, always kind of turn it down, keep it nice and subtle. And as it's going, you can actually feel the shifting of the center of gravity and the footsteps and all of that as we get closer. And you don't get that with random noise. And of course, you can still change the focal length. I love you. Again, if you watch most movies these days, the shots are fairly stationary, but they still have just a little bit of life to them, as if there is somebody holding the camera, operating it. And so I like, for that one, like The Wedding, which just stays very stationary, and again, maybe turning the influence down, so it's just moving just a tiny little bit. Or if you're tired of all your friends asking you to film their weddings, you can pick Bike on Gravel. This one also benefits from a little bit of motion blur. So all of these are based off of actual camera data. So like, yes, I literally rode a bike holding a camera on gravel. Walking to the store, I was walking to some trees. Out the car window, we actually drove down the road and filmed out the windshield and tracked the foreground stuff, and it all loops perfectly. So you can just have this stuff go forever. And you might be like, Ian, won't people notice eventually the looping noise? I don't think so.
And you might be thinking, Ian, you're not smart enough to do this. And yeah, like I could track a camera, apply it to an empty. I had the solution in mind where it's like you'd have to import a bunch of empties and use copy, rotation, location constraints and set up all of this stuff to apply it on your camera. It was going to be a big pain in the butt. But having like an easy to use, you know, dummy-proof method of applying this motion onto everything, that's where I want to show you something. So through this door now, in the church, there's a little room here. And in the room is my friend Nathan Vegdahl. Nathan has been a mainstay in the Blender community for like a decade and a half or something. He worked on Big Buck Bunny and Sintel as an animator. And he also made kind of the first incarnation of Rigify, which is a really common add-on.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
For,
well, that's not quite true. Campbell Barton made the first incarnation.
That's true, but the version that people in general are mostly familiar with.
But I just want to make sure we do give credit where credit is due, because people make that mistake a lot. It's like, no, actually, Campbell is the one that wrote the first version, and then I cleaned it up and made it like easier to use and released.
Gotcha.
So that was the first released version.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But you did make all of the rigs and stuff that were originally in that.
I did design all the rigs that were
okay.
in it, yeah.
So if you've ever used Rigify, you're familiar with some of Nathan's stuff already. But now he's here, he's in this room, and we get to hang out all the time, and it's been very fun. So what are you working on right now?
So I'm basically trying to put the last finishing touches on the add-on before we release it, and the main thing I want to do is make it so that you can adjust the scale of kind of the units of the world. So if you work in a system where and I think you always work this way, but where one Blender unit is 1 meter, then the add-on as it is going to work just fine. But if you work where one Blender unit is a centimeter or a kilometer or whatever, then you will have centimeter camera shake or kilometer camera shake, and that's probably not good.
Okay, so what do we mean when we say working at scale? I got started with art, like drawing in sketchbooks and stuff, where you can doodle, you know, as small or as big as you want, and it doesn't really matter. So when I jumped over into CG and started working at stuff, I was just doing it, you know, however I wanted. And people said, why aren't you modeling at scale? And I was like, shut up, I'm doing what I want. But there's a lot of reasons why you might want to model at scale. And scale just means each one of these squares corresponds to a real world unit. In this case, Blender assumes each one of these is a meter. One of the biggest reasons for this is physics, because Blender assumes that each square is a meter. You know, certain things will fall at a certain speed, or water will splash at a certain speed, and if you have the scene at one scale and the physics at the other, everything will look kind of weird. And you can change that here in the scene settings. You can change the unit scale and correct things there, but that won't always affect physics. One of the ways I like to make sure I'm working at scale is I have a little person that I'll import into the scene, but in a pinch, you can also just bring in a cube, and by default, a cube is 2 meters squared, which is actually taller or larger than a person. But right here, under the height, I'm just gonna put in 175 centimeters, which is the average height of a person. And now we can move this person around. You can see this scene is actually scaled up a little bit larger than it should be, because this cube looks a little bit too small compared to the doors, and so you can fix that there, or I would recommend actually like scaling everything else, you know, down to be the right size. Regardless, none of that matters in terms of camera shake, because Nathan's just handed me the final version of the camera shake, which now includes location scale, which just controls how much you can crank this up. The location offset affects the scene, and this is just kind of, you can either make this match the scene properly, you know, eyeballing it, or you can use it like this, kind of stylistically. By default, when it's set to 1, it's moving the way it was actually moving in real life when we captured the shake. And of course, if you want, like with everything, you can hover over it and hit I and keyframe these values, so he comes to a little stop here. So one thing that both Nathan and I are really into is the open source like community and the open sourceness of Blender, which means, especially if Nathan's making a tool, we want it to be available to a lot of people. And so it's really exciting that we've been able to flow some of the Patreon money to Nathan so that he can just make cool tools that we're gonna like be able to put out there. But
thank you very much.
But also, because you guys are kind of the ones making it possible, we want you guys to get it right first, and maybe do a little bug testing. If you
you can be our guinea pigs.
If you run into anything weird, let us know. Or if there's a new camera shake that you would like to see in there, it's really easy for us to add new ones. And for anybody curious how to loop camera tracking animation like this, I'll show you just because it's really easy. So hopping over into layout, I'm going to add a camera here. I'm going to create a new constraint here with the camera solver on it. There we go. So this now has the tracking data. And I'm going to constrain to F curves, which makes it... Actually, before I do that, I did a bunch of stuff with scaling to make sure that it was actually at like eyeball height, to make sure it was all to human scale. But then I constrained to F curves. And here's our data right here. If I were being smart, I would try to make sure that like I was cutting on, you know, the right foot both times so that it actually kind of like loops that way. I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm just going to do this randomly. But if I select everything and hit Shift E, I can make cyclic with an F modifier. And so what I have to do is I just have to bring this point right here down to here. And I can do that with proportional editing. So this means now I can scale up and down and it'll, you know, kind of ease in. I'm going to change this to linear and scroll up until it, if I hold down Shift, it gets a little, and scroll up until it basically covers the entire thing. And I just get to move this down so it lines up. And sometimes I got to tweak the curves a little bit, like if this one's going steep down and the other one's going up, you know, if they don't tend to line up, I have to babysit them. But like right here, I could probably clean this up a little bit, but effectively this is it. And now it loops and it doesn't look noticeable at all.
Oh, that is my laundry.